Hey everyone. Thank you so much for looking at us. My name is Ana Moraro, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of a World Company. So today we have our special guest speaker, Dr. Yvonne Thompson. So welcome, Dr. Yvonne Thompson, to Career Backstage, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me. And we couldn't have had a better day, International Women's Day. So for all the ladies out there, happy International Women's Day. And for all the men out there, thank you for supporting the women.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, happy International Women's Day. Today, we're going to talk about how to drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And I will just do an introduction about Dr. Yvonne Thompson, who has over 33 years experience in communication, in marketing, in PR industry, advising corporations, public sector, educational establishments, and government, championing equality, diversity, and inclusivity in the workplace. So also, Dr. Yvonne Thompson has been honored by Queen Elizabeth II and received 2 doctorates for her work in entrepreneurship, global diversity, and equality arena. So I just done a little bit of introduction about you, Dr. Yvonne, and I know that you are quite a famous person. So a lot of people know quite a lot of stuff about you, but what they don't know about you, what is not so well known about you?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, there's a lot that's not well known about me. The fact that I originally came from Guyana to the UK, came to the UK. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So I arrived in the UK back in the early 1960s. And I arrived with my parents and my 5 brothers and sisters. So there were 8 of us arriving in London. My parents thought that they were being invited by Queen Elizabeth to come and repair the motherland because we were part of the empire, we were part of the Caribbean. And they were sending messages down to the Caribbean saying, come to England, help us repair the motherland. So my parents did that. And we arrived early 1960s. One day, and we came by aeroplane. One day, I was running around in the sugarcane fields.
According to Wikipedia, an airplane or aeroplane is a powered fixed...
Sorry, that's my phone. I am so sorry. That teaches me to turn Siri off. Apologies.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, so we arrived in the UK. One day I was running around in the sugarcane fields in Guyana, and the next day I'd arrived in the UK. It was cold, it was dark, it was foggy. I'd never seen snow before. It was very, very scary. But all of that kind of set my path because it set me on a path of resilience.
Yeah.
From the time I arrived, I knew it was going to be tough. I knew we were different. I knew that, life was never going to be carefree as it was in Guyana. We lived in, my parents found a 2-room, not 2 bedrooms, a 2-roomed flat in the basement in Battersea. Now, Battersea at the time was one of the worst areas of London.
No, it's a good area. Yes, of course.
Tell me about it. So we were in probably the worst street in the worst part of London. And we arrived at the time when it was still legal for landlords to have notices on their doors that said, no dogs, no Irish, no blacks. So you can imagine how hard it was even just to find somewhere to live with 8 people.
Yeah.
But my parents, I call them the true entrepreneurs, because true entrepreneurs leave their homeland. Sometimes they can't speak the language. They don't know the culture. They don't have any money. They don't have any family support around them, but they still come. They still make a living. And also, I think, when you start at sub-zero, you have higher to bounce. And I think for me, that was our story. My parents arrived, we all arrived with one suitcase each. And I always say my parents had the extra burden of one backpack of dreams for each of their children. So to me, when when my parents, we obviously talked about that and they passed that on. And I knew from then that I had to make sure that whatever we do, it was going to work. And that's the beginning of my path. I did, went through the usual prejudice and all that horrible stuff at school and at college. But when I got to work, to actually working, I trained to be a nurse, but I never did become a nurse. In fact, I wanted to be a doctor. I never became a medical doctor, but I do have 2 doctorates. How about that? So that was obviously to be my path. My very first job, where I started really experiencing challenges, both from a female perspective and from gender and race, was my very first job at CBS Records. It was the music industry. Everybody was carefree. They had free tickets to concerts, free sweatshirts, free t-shirts, free caps, free everything. And I was there for about 7.5 years. At the time as well, I was a single parent. And so for me, I always say I had 3 rungs down the ladder. First, I was female. Second, I was Black. And third, I was a single parent. So I had to try 3 times as hard to get where I wanted to get to and do what I wanted to do. After applying, funnily, I've got 3s. After applying 3 times for a job that I would either deputize in or I would stand in for temporarily when somebody was off ill or the job became vacant, 3 times I applied to become head of press. And the 3rd time that I was refused, I just thought to myself, the only way for me to move up is to move out. And that's exactly what I did. I ran into the ladies' toilets, I cried my eyes out, and I came back and I handed in my notice. And 3 weeks later, I was gone. And I've never looked back. But everybody was saying, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Even my family was saying, how are you going to pay for yourself, your living? I just bought a new flat. That's another story. I just, how am I going to look after my daughter? So it was really, this was a test of, again, another test of resilience for me. Because I thought, I have to be responsible for my own destiny. And if I keep listening to people saying, what are you doing? You shouldn't do that. It was always this chatter. And what I did, I used a phrase which I've used from that time up to now. I have to find my focus and focus on my focus. So you've got to know where you're going and you've got to focus on it, because if you don't, you can end up anywhere. So I left CBS and started the first Black-owned PR company in the UK. And through doing that, I got a lot of work with radio stations and cinemas and film companies and things like that. So
that's why you've been recently appointed as a chair of the Radio Academy, representing the UK industry.
The story goes on that through the PR company, I was invited to join a group of people, a group of men. I was the only woman in a board of 10 people that started the UK's first Black music radio station, legal. And we did that and we ran it for 15 years and then we sold it to what is now known as Capital Radio. And Capital Radio is the largest media outlet in the UK. So that was a very interesting experience. But even there, you know, within the Black radio station, I was still a minority within a minority group because I was the only woman, and it was really difficult to have my voice heard, to be taken seriously, not to be thought of as, you know, male chauvinist actions that they do. And so again, it was another test of resilience, and it was another fight, you know, to stand on my own 2 feet and be taken seriously. But that I did. And from there on in, I started being asked, people started asking me to be on boards, government boards. I've sat on various government business boards, advising government, advising small business. I was on the board for the first elected mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, advising them on equality and diversity. I chaired something called the London Learning and Skills Council. Out of 49 Learning and Skills Council across the UK, I was the only Black female chair of any of those out of 49. I couldn't believe it, but I did. I was also invited to go and represent the UK in Brussels on the Economic and Social Committee. I did that. It just goes on. There's, you know, once your name is out there and people know you're good at what you do, they constantly ask you to get involved. But you have to be very careful, because unless these positions are paid, you could end up working for everybody else for free and you lose your focus. So you have to come back and focus on your focus and keep what you're doing going.
Such an inspiration, Dr. Thompson. It's really inspiring, you know, your story.
That, well, do you know, people tell me my story is inspiring, but when I listen to other people's story, I see elements of my story in their story. So especially for women, because I feel that women all over the world, we have the same challenges, we have, you know, the same hurdles, we have the same solutions, and we're doing it across the world and not realizing that we all have something in common. We all, and if only we could, as we were having a discussion before, collaborate and bring women and, well, bring people together, it would be so much strength, so much strength. So one of the other things that I really champion is around equality and diversity. You've heard a little bit of that in my story already. And one of the things I'm passionate about is about women on boards. So in the UK, there's been a campaign called the 30% Club, and it's about getting more women onto FTSE 100 boards. And that campaign has been running now for 10 years, I think. And we're nearly there. We're not quite there. We're nearly there. But the next challenge, of course, is about minorities on boards, because you can look at all these global companies and you can never see a person of color, either as the chairman or the chairwoman, or even sometimes sitting around the board table. And for me, unless we're all in the same room at the same table, listening to the same information at the same time, we will never learn from each other. We will never appreciate what it is that, and sometimes it's very similar. We all have the same challenges, but we never know that because we're never in the same room at the same time. So again, for me, it's all about women coming together and choose to challenge, as the International Women's Day theme is, choose to challenge. And that's what we should be doing. I wrote a book about women on boards, and that was 6 years ago. And that book was my passport to travel the world. It opened the doors to so many corporates. I did over 70 corporate presentations. And then I've traveled to India on my book. I've traveled to Oman on my book. I've traveled to New York, to Canada, across Europe, to Africa, Singapore. I'm just trying to think of all the places, but I've practically traveled the world with that book. So it's an important topic, women on boards. And it's not just about women on boards, it's about equality, it's about leadership. And we have an acronym out of the book, 7 Traits of Highly Successful Women on Boards. And the acronym is about leadership, which is what women do well. We have more emotional intelligence quotas than men. We take more advice. So we're probably on average, we're more educated, and we're also more diverse in our thinking. So that, is, you know, that's the whole acronym around LEAD for women.
Right.
So I mean, I could go on, but I can see you're bursting to ask me questions. But I don't know.
Yes. So I would like to remind people who watch us that we're talking about how to drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And in case if you have any questions, please feel free to put the questions in the comment box, and Dr. Yvonne Thompson will gonna reply to you straight away. So I know that a lot of companies, they embrace and they're talking about diversity. Let's have a diverse workforce in the workplace. Why, for example, diversity actually matters in the workplace. And I don't know how many organizations, for example, they have policies, maybe in processes to embrace a diverse workforce in place, but we don't really know how much diversity they have in the workplace. So why actually diversity matters?
Well, diversity, I mean, there was a McKinsey report that shows, oh, you know about the McKinsey report that shows if you have a good gender balance, you're likely to outperform your competitors by 15%. If you have a race and gender, a good race and gender balance, that moves up to 35%. So it's not just about doing it because it's the moral thing to do, it's the right thing to do. It's the bottom line thing to do. And if your employees represent your audience, your customers, you're likely to do much more business and be much more in tune, have a better relationship with, you know, with your community. So as I said, it's not just the right thing to do. It is about the bottom line as well. So I think a lot of, especially since the whole Black Lives Matter, nearly a year ago already, I can't believe it. When I joined the Radio Academy, and by the way, I've actually just stepped down from the Radio Academy as chair. I've been there for 3 years, so I've just finished my term, stepped down in December. And when I joined the Radio Academy, my maiden speech was, the title was, Diversify or Die. The radio industry needs to diversify or die. Now that speech went down like a lead balloon, only for 18 months later for the whole Black Lives Matter thing to hit the radio industry in the face. And one of the things that I did immediately was look at how we can start to get people to talk about their experiences, get you know, a 360 exchange of views, a 360 mentoring. It was such, I think, with like the rest of the world, it was such a sobering moment. So I started a campaign of webinars called ROAR, R-O-A-R, and that was Race on Audio and Radio, where we had panels of diverse radio presenters, radio producers, gender, race, abilities, sexual orientation, all the people who are outside of the usual Box came and talked about the radio industry through their lens, how it's colored. And it really did just leave everybody speechless. And since I've stepped down, in fact, we've got a campaign going on right now, which is another one that I started, called Women in Radio and Audio. And that's running throughout International Women's Month. And all of the radio stations that are members of the Academy are joining every Wednesday lunchtime to hear about the experience of women from different areas within the radio industry, whether it's podcasting, whether it's management, technical, presenter in front or behind the radio. So those are the two legacies that I've left behind and made a change, I hope, a lasting change within the UK's radio industry. But really, as far as people wanting to know about how do you start to have change within, you know, or diverse change,
yes,
lasting change within the, you know, within your organization. I think first and foremost, people need to learn to be comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. You know, usually if you start talking about race, and sometimes it doesn't matter how much of a friend or how well you think you know somebody, if you start having the conversation about race, that is, you know, that's some of the most awkward conversations you can have. So you have to become comfortable with having those conversations, because if you don't have those conversations, they grow into a much bigger problem, And then what tends to happen is that the person from an ethnic minority background will feel ostracized, will then think about leaving the company. And that's just no good for anybody. That's no good. So get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. Get used to having what I call difficult dialogues, one-to-one conversations, where everybody, it's not just one-sided. It's not just me that's going to feel ostracized, or it's not just you that might feel, oh, you know, I've got white privilege, or I've got, you know, any of those types of conversations. The conversation needs to be equally recognized from both sides of the coin. You know, people talk about having and doing bias or unbiased training, but that is something good to do, but it's only useful if the people being trained are prepared to take it on board, accept what it is that they're being taught, and they know how to use it and know how to recognize it. Because you can do the training and walk out and still have, you know, have all these things still around you and not even realize. So unless it's a really good trainer and the people being trained are able to accept, you know, what the whole conversation, then it's not worth it.
Yeah. So, Dr. Yvonne, which behaviors make people feel included? You know, in different organizations, because different organizations have different organization culture, different values, and obviously people shape behaviors, right? So, which kind of behaviors make people feel included? If you can share us an example, that would going to be really great.
Well, again, it really does depend on the culture of the company. You know, what makes somebody feel comfortable in banking is going to be very different to what makes somebody feel comfortable in retail or in restaurant. But it's, you know, it's allowing people to bring their real selves to work. We've all heard that.
Yeah.
You know, there are people that I know, and there have been organizations that I've been in that I feel, you know, I wouldn't feel comfortable wearing what I'm wearing. You know, this is African print.
Yeah.
And this is the real me. I would have to, in some organizations, I would have to, as they say, take off my culture coat and leave it at the door. And it's about everybody accepting and be, and the comfortable with being uncomfortable works both ways, because, you know, I have to accept that some people are going to be uncomfortable, and it's how I react to them, and that will either make them think, oh God, you know, another black woman, or another angry black woman, or do you know what I mean? So it really just depends on the organization. It depends on the personalities, and, you know, it depends on how much people really want to understand. One of the worst things people could have said to me, and I've got a lot of white friends, and the worst thing, and two of them said this to me, the worst thing they could have said to me during the Black Lives Matter is, oh my God, Yvonne, I really feel your pain. You could, that was just the worst thing, you know, and that came from people that I thought were my friends, and they thought they were doing something good, but they didn't really think about it. It was more of a sound bite. You know, it was something that everybody was saying, I feel your pain. And they could never feel my pain. Just as I'm sure there are things in their lives that, you know, that I could never feel.
Yeah.
So it just depends. There's so much that it depends on, because you can't say one hat or one, you know, one thing fits every organization. It just doesn't.
Yeah. And obviously, because you've been working for many companies, so how do the organizations build a safe and inclusive culture? Yeah, different organizations will have different, you know, different kind of ways or methods to, you know, to build that safe and inclusive culture. But in the organization that you used to work so far, for example, like let's take the academy, the radio where you used to work. So how did you build that kind of safe and inclusive culture for everyone? Like everyone like feel that they belong to a family?
Well, first and foremost, the academy was not a physical academy. It was a charity as well. It was also a charity. Whilst I dealt with a lot of different organizations, we weren't actually all in one building. But having said that, you know, when it comes to having board meetings and, you know, the faces that actually sit around that board table, that's when you see who is really who and how they react to you. I think I was very lucky. I think I had enough experience. And by the way, I was the third woman to chair the Radio Academy in its 40 years. And I was the first person of color to chair that organization in 40 years. So you could already see there was a lot of historical challenges. I'm trying to be diplomatic now.
Yeah, thank you.
But you know, I think the radio and the music industry in general have really woken up. As the saying goes, they're really woke now. So, but having said that, you just don't know until there's another incident. You know, you just do not know what really has changed until there's another incident, and then you probably see you're right back where you started. So progress is slow. It's very much like, you know, the gender process, the progress. It's very slow. But the race process is even slower. So there's a lot has happened, but there's still a lot more to happen that could happen. And it will be generations, I think, before there's any kind of parity between, race and with the intersection, gender and the intersectionality of race. Is going to be a while before the two even become, even halfway there.
Yeah. And if we're going to go back, obviously, again to the behavior. So which leadership behaviors do people need to see in order to believe in an inclusive culture? For example, you can take yourself as an example. What kind of behavior you wanted to see from the leaders just to feel included in that organization that you used to work for?
I think it's very much about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And, I think more and more organizations are realizing that emotional intelligence, it's not just a female trait, it's a necessary trait for men and women to be aware of what's going on around them, aware of their staff, aware of their situation, spatially aware. And for me, emotional intelligence is top of the, I don't, in the past, people would say, oh, that's just for women, or, what is that? But now more and more organizations are realizing, I think we're in a new era. For me, we are in the era of she. We've moved into that more caring, I would say, caring and kind. And the biggest example has been the lockdown and COVID. The words, certainly in the UK, I'm not sure about where else around the world, but certainly in the UK, the word that people most associate with the lockdown is kindness. Behavioral
Yes.
is kindness. So, and I think, again, that's because more and more of us realize, even though as a race, the human race, we're very resilient, because, at the beginning of all this, I think we were all sure that we're all going to die. We were going to be wiped off the face of the earth. But we found a way, and we've even learnt new behaviors now. It's interesting. I was talking to my husband about face masks. Are we, after this, is the behavior going to go back to not wearing face masks, or will we now, is that now going to be part of our everyday lives? And even with wearing face masks, do we still lose our identity, or has that become part of our identity?
Yeah, I think you're right about this kind of, now even employers looking more for people who have cognitive skills, and one of these is empathy. So it's really important, because this is going to be another way how people can help each other. People can go for an extra mile, and that should come from their heart. It's not just because otherwise they're not going to be the way that these people can grow and can build something together. So anyway, there are quite a lot of organizations that they fail to embrace diversity. Why, for example, organizations fail to embrace diversity, even they make such a lot of efforts, to embrace diversity and inclusion, they fail? What the reason can be behind of this?
Well, for me, it's always, there's a very famous book that's called The Fish Rots from the Head. And that is about leadership. And unless the leadership is able to embed that culture and lead by example, why should people who, well, they should, but their thinking is, why should I be the one to lead on this? But it's all the things that we've just talked about. It is about being emotionally intelligent. It is about being kind. It is about a new era of life. You know, we've had the industrial era. We've had the digital era. I think we're now moving towards an era of emotional intelligence and kindness.
Yeah. And I always put the last question, which is with tips and tricks, and obviously is about the topic that we discussed today. So how to drive the diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Just give us some kind of tips, tricks, or some bullet points as a tips. So people who watching us.
Yeah, I've said some of them already.
Yeah,
I think
just like a reminder. Yeah.
Okay, you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You've got to learn to have the difficult dialogues, otherwise, things will never come out. You've got to be emotionally intelligent. You've got to have, it goes back to the beginning of my talk, you've got to have a focus and focus on your focus. Because if you're not interested, if it's not something that you're interested in, it's a bit, the example of that is, like before, I'm trying to work out the right way of saying this. So for instance, if you buy a car, if you saw a car and you thought, oh, I want to get that car, nobody else has got that car, I'm going to get that car. And then once you've got that car, you see everybody else has got that car. You suddenly become aware of that car. I don't know if you're a driver, but that's how it works.
I'm not.
And, it's the same sort of thing. It's the same sort of awareness. It is opening up your awareness. If you become and learn how to be culturally aware, diverse aware, it becomes part of your everyday life, and it's not a struggle, and it works. So focus on your focus, learn to become comfortable with uncomfortable conversations, have the difficult dialogue, focus on your focus. I mean, there's so much more, we talked about them, be emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do like to start and end my talks with are two African proverbs. The first is, and I need to make sure I get it right because I haven't got it written down in front of me. The first one is, until the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. Now, you have to think very carefully about that one. And then the last one, which I think is really becoming my Women in Business motto. And that one is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yvonne Thompson, for sharing with us about equality, diversity, and how to drive this diversity and inclusion in the workplace. It was a really pleasure to have you at Career Backstage, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And we spent like 39 minutes on International Women's Days. So thank you so much thank you so much to the audience who watch us. And I could see that Rana said us hello. So hello, Rana. We didn't have any other questions, but I'm pretty sure people are going to watch the video after that. I will see you next time on Monday, 15th of March at 3 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. Romanian time with Chris. So until then, take care and stay safe and have a great day and a great week ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.